Hey, two quick disclaimers. First, these films are only in cinemas, so I don't have much footage to edit with, sorry about that. And second, when this video talks about the life, actions, and contexts of J. Robert Oppenheimer, it's talking about the semi-fictionalized character and the semi-fictionalized context, not the real guy and not the real war. Alright, that's it, let's go. That Greta Gerwig's Barbie and Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer were set to release on the same day was originally a fairly meaningless coincidence. Yes, it may have been deliberate, an attempt by Warner to spite Nolan for leaving to Universal, but on every level beyond corporate politics, yeah, meaningless. But then something funny happened. We found meaning in it. Two big films, which both looked really good, releasing on the same day but seeming so diametrically opposed in terms of look, genre, and most important of all, vibe. Inevitably, memes were made, but less inevitably they caught on, fanning a wildfire of organic hype any studio would kill for. By that release date, the world had been swept up in Barbenheimer fever. Viewers flocked to watch the double feature. The question wasn't, were you going to go and see these films? It was, which one are you seeing first? What's your order? Which one are you dressing up for? Which protagonist was literally you for real? Cinemas, studios, viewers alike benefited from this newfound meaning. But the dress-up, the memes, don't have to be where this ends. What if we don't stop looking for meaning in that comparison now that the films are out? What if we take the Barbenheimer concept into the cinema with us? What can be gained from approaching these films together? Well, more than you might have thought. There's a lot going on in Barbie, enough that genuinely, I think you'd need a good few repeat viewings to get to the bottom of it all. I don't yet understand Barbie, but I hope to, one day. As a result though, there's an awful lot you could dig into. There's a fairly straightforward existential undercurrent here. You could probably put together a pretty interesting intertextual analysis, uncovering the significance of those Matrix and 2001 allusions, and I'd personally love to see someone come up with a Foucault-inspired reading of power in Barbie Land, how it's generated and how it shifts. Maybe the most obvious questions Barbie raises, though, are to do with gender. What will it take for our society to realize the inherent flaws in the model of femininity it has constructed? What would the results of that realization be? How useful are the products and messages of corporate feminism? How useful can they ever be in pursuing truly egalitarian ideals, incompatible as those ideals would surely be with the wider inequalities those corporate efforts necessarily perpetuate? Questions like this are asked by the film. The intentionality is clear. But other questions are prompted too, only it's not always clear if the film wants us to ask them. For instance, the problems under the Kenocracy are juxtaposed against the Barbie's earlier freedom to serve as an admittedly exaggerated demonstration to both stereotypical Barbie and to less knowledgeable audience members of how the enforcement of stereotypical ideas of femininity is harmful. And sure, what's being demonstrated here makes sense, but you might argue that the way it's being demonstrated does not, because there's an imbalance here that goes unaddressed. In the halcyon days of the film's start, Barbies ran things and Kens did not. Indeed, the roles Kens played in society were limited in similar ways to those played by post-patriarchy Barbies. And yet Barbocracy is good and Kenocracy is not. Why? On a surface level, it might seem that the film's not as enlightened as it thinks it is. It might seem that there is a sense of gender essentialism operating here, one perhaps seen even more clearly in the different ways that the Barbies and Kens act after exposure to reality. Women are good but weak, men are bad but strong. The film establishes that the Barbies' weakness, their mental collapse, follows their exposure to our contradictory feminine ideals, ideals so dissonant and unfamiliar to Barbie Land that the Barbies' defenses are bypassed. But the film's perfectly aware of the fact that the masculine ideal the Kens begin to express is also a flawed, contradictory, harmful thing. So there is an imbalance here, right? Why does failure to embody our contradictory feminine ideal result in the Barbie's subservience, while the Ken's failure to embody a similarly impossible masculinity lead them to dominate and repress? Is Barbie still doing that whole Kens are from Mars, Barbies are from Venus thing? Well, What are the roots of that clutch? What branches grow out of this stony rubbish? Son of man, you cannot say or guess, for you know only a heap of broken images, where the sun beats, and the dead tree gives no shelter, the cricket no relief, and the dry stone no sound of water. Things fell apart at the start of the 20th century. Oppenheimer, the film, knows this, is determined to convey it. We hear physicists still grappling with the implications of relativity and the new physics, with the fact that the way the world had been understood on a basic physical level was wrong, and the way a new, near incomprehensible reality had replaced it. We see J. Robert Oppenheimer taking in a Picasso. We see him reading T.S. Eliot's The Waste Land, an excerpt of which you've just heard. These are modernist works, a broad movement which saw artists across the world ripping up the rulebook, writing poems with no meter and no rhyme, painting portraits that did away with realistic perspectives, writing prose without sentences or punctuation. But despite the modernist rallying cry of "make it new," these artists weren't just tearing things up, they were, as often as not, simply responding to a world ripping itself apart. Sometimes there's a sense of liberation in modernist art, but just as often it's the opposite. The art laments the loss of faith and certainty this new century had brought. The first glimpse of Oppenheimer's life we're given is his time at Cambridge in the mid-1920s, which is, of course, less than a decade after the Great War. After those 18th century narratives of progress towards universal sophistication and civilization were ripped to shreds, after a generation of Europe's young men were slaughtered for nationalism, pride, and a few meters of French mud. So the film begins, chronologically at least, in a time of fragmentation. Science, religion, culture, geopolitics, ideology, even gender roles and sexuality, the principles that had seemed to govern every aspect of life, had revealed themselves to be flimsy things indeed. In nearly every way, this was an unstable time, something the film's own non-linearity underscores nicely, but it was also a time of transition. We call this the interwar period, after all. Physicists and artists weren't the only ones rocked by that pervasive sense of socio-cultural fragmentation. In fact, a whole political system sprang up based on appealing to that sense of uncertainty, on bemoaning this new world, and labeling new art, new ways of thinking, existing, unconstrained by old faiths and customs, as degenerate, on looking back toward a largely fictionalized past for meaning, identity, and cohesion, on rejecting modernity and embracing tradition. This system even took its name from an ancient Roman symbol of authority. Fascism was born. Fascism lurks in the background of Oppenheimer. Even the war it provokes is off-screen, but it's unspeakably important to the film, and to our Jewish protagonist. The only somewhat valid justification for the bomb's development is that if the US isn't the country to build it, Nazi Germany will be. As reasons for creating the nuclear bomb go, that's probably the best you're gonna get. But well, it isn't the only one in Oppenheimer's mind. Midway through a sex scene, Oppenheimer's talking with his lover, Jean Tatlock, about his psychological difficulties. He mentions that during his studies, he'd tried to poison his professor, whom he'd actually liked very much. In response, Jean tells him he just needed to get laid, a response Oppenheimer accepts. By the end of the film, though, the viewer may well have a different opinion. They might recall that the admittedly homesick Oppenheimer poisoned his tutor's apple immediately after being publicly scolded in front of his male peers by him, and they might compare this to the eagerness with which Oppenheimer later embarrasses Louis Strauss in a hearing. They might wonder if that comparison highlights a particular sensitivity in the protagonist to these sorts of homosocial respect games, the way humiliation in the eyes of one's peers can secure or destroy one's masculinity, and so they might begin to see masculinity as a driving force for Oppenheimer and in Oppenheimer more widely. If this is the case, then Jean's solution is a solution of sorts. After all, what better place is there to affirm that traditional masculinity to win that game than in the arms of a woman, but it's not necessarily the solution, as we'll go on to see. After that moment of mid-coital psychoanalysis, Jean returns to the bed, carrying with her a copy of the Bhagavad Gita. But she doesn't let things continue until she's had Oppenheimer translate a phrase from the scripture, which he does, reading out, "Now I am become death, destroyer of worlds." That is, of course, the phrase Oppenheimer would recall during the Trinity test, after he'd successfully completed the atomic bomb, mankind's deadliest invention. As that scene with Jean ends, then, the film explicitly ties together an affirmation of Oppenheimer's masculine stature with his eventual quest to build the bomb. That, the film suggests, is the other reason Oppenheimer builds the bomb. It is, no doubt, heightened by his subsequent years spent in a largely military environment, and it's the reason he doesn't abandon the project when Germany surrenders, and that original justification falls away. There seems to be some subconscious way in which Oppenheimer's masculine self-identity is tied to the bomb, and that masculinity won't be vindicated if he abandons the project or joins with the faction of scientists opposing its usage, hence that persistent caginess. If you were to view the film as a tragedy, this would be Oppenheimer's hamartia, his fatal flaw. By the film's logic, his actions up until this point had been permissible. This is his mistake. The film makes this clear in a couple of ways. First, there had always been something unsettling in the way, faced with that modernist fragmentation, Oppenheimer chose to ground his anxiety, his vulnerability in that traditionally masculine drive, the drive that culminates in the bomb, since that regression seems to echo the basic ideological flaw of his enemies, of seeking certainty in the traditional, attempting to navigate a fragmented world by going backward. As another character asks him at one point, "You embraced the revolution in physics. Can't you see it everywhere else?" After the bombing, that echo is made explicit. We hear, alongside Oppenheimer, that the explosion had burned so bright, there had been an impression that its disfigured victims were wearing striped clothing. The parallel is unmissable. But the film doesn't simply condemn the morality of Oppenheimer's continued work, because the masculinity play was for naught too. See, this isn't just a film about the bomb, it's also a film about the individual and the state, yada yada yada, that's another video, but the film is awfully clear that if Oppenheimer thinks the detonation of the atomic bomb will prove his stature, his manhood to the country and to the world, he is wrong. Trinity's success isn't his moment of radioactive, masculine apotheosis, it's the precise moment at which he stops mattering. Colonel Groves puts it nicely, mere minutes after the detonation. With respect, Dr. Oppenheimer, we'll take it from here. Much like his mistaken assumption that the atomic bomb would be the be-all and end-all of military technology, instead of simply kicking off an arms race of unprecedented proportions, Oppenheimer seems blind to the fact that this isn't how performative masculinity works. He can't win the game like this, because the game doesn't end, and he isn't the only one trying to win it. After the bombings, as all this starts to become apparent to Oppenheimer, as those unexpectedly negative effects of that vanity project upon his self-identity are becoming too much to bear, as he begins to see the blood on his hands, he goes to President Truman, only to be told that no, the blood was on his hands, that the world will remember Truman dropped the bombs, not Oppenheimer. The following years see the scientist's stature lessen, slowly at first and then all at once. See him letting all remaining hints of that radioactive masculinity fall through his hands, until, at the moment of his undoing, he shakes the hand of his undoer. His grip on this radioactive masculinity was wrong, was his flaw, but, well, it didn't come from nowhere. As we see after Trinity, as we see throughout the film, he's not the only one playing this homosocial respect game, chasing self-aggrandizement, locating success as a man in destruction. It's what his colleagues do, it's what his superiors do, it's what his enemies do. So he picks up on it, as so many do, because it isn't innate. With Jean, with his colleagues, with the army against those off-screen Nazis, we see this type of masculinity being reinforced. And before even this, back in Cambridge with the professor and those other students, we see it being learned. The flaws of the Kenocracy weren't inherent to the Kens, because this new masc-Kenlinity didn't arise in a vacuum, it was learned, taken from the toxic, patriarchal world of the LA business sphere, alongside the Ken-imported, repressive Barbie femininity, or rather taken from a, let's be honest, kinda thick Ken's one-dimensional impressions of that LA gender politic. These new Kens aren't from Mars, these new Barbies aren't from Venus, they're both from some Californian late capitalist business park. Garbage in, garbage out. The Ken's domination isn't any more innate than the Barbie's submission. It's just as learned, just as conditional. It relies on that contact with the real that throws the thoroughly artificial Barbie Land out of whack. And that actually brings us nicely to the other part. Why is barbocracy good? Why are those Barbie-favoring imbalances approved of by the film? Because of that artificiality. The film tells us from minute one that Barbies and Barbie Land were manufactured, created as inverted reflections of the real, in order to fulfill a specific aspirational purpose, to demonstrate to a mid-20th century audience what women could achieve. This isn't a state of nature, it's the targeted imagination of a world run by girls to show that was always possible, and the Kenocracy is a problem because it voids this symbol, because it shows that poisonous potential of patriarchy to conquer not only women's lives, but also their imaginations. But of course, that isn't where the film ends. After the bombings, Oppenheimer starts to see the game he's playing can never be won. The scene with Truman, the downfall of Strauss, the failure of his petty quest for revenge, and the would-be politician's paranoia, his compulsive belief in the idea that Oppenheimer and Einstein had turned the scientists against him, destroyed his status. We see again and again that that quest for this radioactive masculinity is zero-sum, that it can only be reached by pulling others down. We see men ruined by their slavish devotion to the game. That's where the film ends, with Strauss realizing he's been used as a pawn in some young no-name's bid for status. And then of course there's the death blow, when Strauss's own aide asks him, isn't it possible they were talking about something more important? With that, Strauss is done. But is this cycle inevitable? How do you escape? Well, what if you don't have to win or lose? What if you just stop playing? Barbie shows us that the toxic masculinity of the Kenocracy isn't innate, is learned, and what is learned can be unlearned. Barbie shows us that men are victims of patriarchy too, and how to escape this fate. It might seem easy to seek meaning and reassurance in the masculine signifiers we're sold, the big cars, the brewski beers, and the social dynamics of dominance, respect, humiliation we're taught, but all of this is just made-up stuff we've been shown, is just a fantasy we're all pretending to see together, and it was never total. What about the female scientists? What about Kitty's fiery outshining of Robert Robb? What about the fact that even in that scene with Jean, Oppenheimer is not the one in charge? It's a fantasy that we've been convinced we need, a game of competitive make-believe that never ends, and so can never be won. Certain viewers have called Barbie unkind to men for pointing this out, but it really isn't. It is overwhelmingly kind for pointing out to Ken and to all of us watching that no, we don't need it. We don't need to respond to uncertainty, to fragmentation, whether it's the self that seems to be falling apart or the whole world, by looking to traditions or simple, fictionalized, nostalgic narratives of the world and how we fit into it. We are all Kenough ourselves. Look, the point of this video isn't to suggest that this is some long-lost medallion sitch, that the key to understanding Oppenheimer is Barbie and vice versa. It's simply that these films are both rich, bursting at the seams with ideas, that there are areas of commonality between these two seemingly worlds-apart films, and that reading one with the other can illuminate both. The key here isn't either film, it's us. It's generated when we choose to actively engage with film, to ask questions, make comparisons, spot parallels and pursue their meanings, instead of simply reacting, letting movies wash over us and responding solely to the most superficial of layers. You could do this with any two films. You could do this with any one film. You could do this with anything. So maybe that's what we can gain here. Maybe the gift of Barbenheimer is the gift of a better, more engaged critical practice. And I think that's where we'll leave things. Thanks for watching. I hope you are all become happy viewer, liker of video. Big shout out as always to my Patreon supporters on screen now, especially Daniel Goldhorn, Ryan Emily, Thomas R, and Weirdy Beardy, and I'll see you all soon.